RWBY, Volume 1, Episodes 6 and 7, The Emerald Forest. What happens? We start off with Yang wandering the forest in search of a teammate until she encounters some Ursa. She has a quick scuffle with the Grimm and pairs up with Blake. Meanwhile, Weiss and RWBY struggle to work together against a pack of Beowulfs. A small forest fire allows the girls a chance to run, though escaping doesn't help the two with getting along. Elsewhere, Pyrrha and Jean are making the way through foliage until Pyrrha explains Aura and unlocks Jean's as we watch Ren fight a King Taijutsu. With the lesson and fight over, Nora drops in to team up with Ren. Linda and Osmond discuss the standings of the class for a bit as we then transition back to RWBY and Weiss. The girls continue to bicker as Blake and Yang make it to their destination. Meanwhile, Jean and Pyrrha find a cave, assuming it to be their destination. Back with the girls, Blake and Yang decide to take the gold horse piece. Pyrrha and Jean discover the cave is home to a giant Deathstalker. The two manage to get away from the Grimm, but it seems Jean's not the only one in the sky, as RWBY plummets into the camera to end the episode. I want to start out by quickly mentioning that using the forest to reference the Emerald City is a really cute idea. It's not the deepest reference to the character's fairy tale origins, but it is still a nice little nod. It only took 5 episode parts, but we finally get another fight. It's amazing that it took so long, honestly. After episode 1, we waited 5 weeks to get to see the characters use their weapons again. I think it helps that all that time of little to no action was spent doing other important things. Fights are fun, but the setting, world, characters, and their dynamics had to be introduced first. And luckily they did all those introductions in a way that kept those 5 episode parts interesting, even without any combat. All that being said, this little fight Yang has with the Ursa isn't too exciting, really. It's real short and the Ursa seem totally incompetent, though it is fun getting to see Yang go berserk. It's an unimpressive, if still entertaining way to introduce Yang's combat style to the show. It's also fun seeing the juxtaposition between how she and Blake handle the Grimm. Yang's goofing off throughout the fight, taking pot shots and stopping to make jokes. It's not until she gets upset that she decides to get serious. In comparison, Blake takes out the Ursa quickly and quietly. Yang sends one flying with a barrage of attacks, Blake just takes one down with a well-placed strike. It shows a lot of personality in the two, while also letting the audience know there will be different fighting techniques used in the cast. Nice work!
This will be perfect! The smartest girl in class combined with the strongest girl in class. Together we will be unstoppable.
Wow, it sure is convenient that all the Beowulfs just stand around doing nothing while Weiss goes over her training. But for real though, enemies just waiting for the hero to get ready during combat is a consistent problem with RWBY, and I wish they would find a way to have the heroes drop their monologues during combat without simply having the villains stop moving for extended periods of time.
Right foot forward.
That is blatantly her left foot. We even see her keep her left foot forward when she tries to execute the attack. Come on, guys. Similar to Blake and Yang's tussle, this is a fun sneak peek at how Weiss fights and how that's also different from her teammates. I like that in early RWBY volumes, the kids really felt unique in how they fight. That's something that isn't really found in the newer volumes, where the cast all basically feel the same during combat. Everyone moves at the same speed and has the same tactic of just attack from the front, and I lament the loss of varied strategies of the girls seen in the earlier volumes. You know, Weiss is right to be mad here. RWBY is clearly not paying attention to her teammate. Weiss spends 20 whole seconds getting ready to attack one enemy, and RWBY doesn't bother to take note of that. We know that both of these girls should be more than capable of handling these Grimm, not only from what we've seen them do in their trailers, but also by comparing this fight to the others in the episode. Yang goofs around when she finds the Grimm, and Ren handles a much bigger threat all on his own. But RWBY being unwilling to consider teamwork hinders both of the girls during the fight. It's an interesting idea to have RWBY need to learn to work together, because otherwise she does just end up getting in the way of others. Which makes it a bit of a shame that this plot point gets resolved so quickly, finishing in the very next episode. Yikes. Once again, I think it's interesting that Weiss is in the right here. RWBY's defense of, well, sorry you need my help to win a fight, is a flimsy excuse for her admitted lack of communication. I like that RWBY, the protagonist, is the one who's wrong. It'd be easy to just make Weiss act like a mean bitch and have RWBY look great in comparison, but they actively have our hero be flawed here. It's fun getting to see RWBY have to actually develop. In more recent volumes, RWBY's the epitome of perfect purity, always in the right, always coming up with the perfect plan, always the voice of reason. That's dumb. And boring. Our hero should grow and learn and develop throughout their journey, but RT doesn't seem to know how to make RWBY the star of the show without just making her always right in conversation and always OP during fights. But this episode shows how good it is to allow the protagonist to mess up. We get to see RWBY learn how to work together, and it's satisfying to see how that growth helps them get out of the forest later. I wish Roosterteeth would allow themselves to remember a time where RWBY got to actually be a developing character, and perhaps try to return to that for future volumes.
Do you know what aura is?
Of course I do. Do you know what aura is?
I don't even think the writers know what aura is by this point. Aura changes jobs so much that by volume 6 it seems like it can do 3 different things, and no one can agree on what those things are. And I'm gonna be real, Pyrrha's explanation here doesn't really help. According to her, it helps you identify when enemies are nearby, which we've only ever seen Ren do. She also says everyone, including animals, have aura, which makes me confused as to why Jean didn't learn about this at some point in school.
They are the darkness, and we are the light.
Right. That's why we fight them.
No, you fight them because they do nothing but destroy and kill. Grimm being the darkness and humans being the light doesn't mean shit because the Grimm are fought for survival. And then Pyrrha says that you have to understand both dark and light to manifest aura? Also, no? Pyrrha's dialogue implies that the kids have all done some Buddhist-esque training to understand yin and yang and be able to open their third eye to use aura, but then literally 40 seconds later, just unlocks Jean's for him. Did that glowing shit act as a super meditation on dark and light? And what does dark and light even mean? Like, literal occurrence or lack of illumination? It's a good thing that we get to watch Ren fight the snake during this little spiel, because when you actually pay attention to what Pyrrha says, it's clear that the writers just had her say sort of enlightened sounding shit for a bit.
It's like a force field!
That you have to remember to turn on, even though it's described as passive, and sometimes it's more like a health bar, and it shimmers when it gets low, and it has a slightly different shimmer when you run out, and it can heal you, and you can train it to recharge faster than you can take damage.
Yes, if you want to look at it that way.
Why would you zoom in on Jean's janky face if it's gonna look this bad when he closes his eyes? Can, like, anyone do this? Pyrrha's little chant implies that this is a ritual she's performing, one that she knows by heart. Why isn't unlocking aura a thing people do with their kids, like a bar mitzvah or something? If you can just make it so your family and friends have protective force fields, why wouldn't you? Let's rewind for a bit and talk about Ren's fight here. While Yang's encounter with the Ursa was basically just a mini semblance display, this feels like the first real fight of the volume after the first episode. There's a lot of fun movement and there's a good sense of weight and scale to everything. It's kinda weird that Ren's weapon have such a deep sound when it seems like they just blow air at the enemy. Also, I'm gonna point out that the fact that this is one two-headed snake and not two snakes isn't super clear here. But all that aside, it's a fun little fight to keep the audience engaged during Pyrrha's diatribe, especially on repeat viewings. Fun fact, sloths kinda just scream. You know, it's kind of amazing that more gets done in this 7-minute episode part than in the entire episode of Rest and Resolutions. How are they getting these camera angles? I also think it's funny that Glinda's being so unabashedly rude about the students. I wish we got to see more of bitch Glinda. She's a refreshing change from all the other blandly nice authority figures on the good guy's side.
I don't care what his transcripts say. That Jean fellow is not ready for this level of combat.
Isn't that the point of the initiation? While they focus the bulk of their explanation on the team building element of the initiation, they also mention that the kids' abilities will be evaluated in the forest. Oz even says,
"You will be monitored and graded for the duration of your initiation."
if Glinda really thinks Jean's abilities aren't good enough, then that should come up in his grade. All that being said, I don't understand how someone not ready for this level of combat could get into the initiation anyway. Glinda says that the students at Beacon are hand-picked to enter. Jean is among a privileged few who got accepted by demonstrating the courage needed to uphold Remnant's peace. Unless Glinda's opening speech was bullshit, Jean had to have proven himself to be good enough before he even was allowed on the airship. But I think I might be the only person on Earth who's thought this much about this line. Why don't the kids have a map? Ozpin had told them to go north, but wouldn't it have been a better test of survival skills if the kids had all the tools necessary to finding their destination, without just hoping they went to the correct northern area?
Oh, stop it. You don't know where we are either. Well, at least I'm not pretending like I know everything.
Yeah, but at least Weiss was actually trying to figure out where to go. Ruby was just sitting on the floor like a pouty child, more concerned with staying pissy about their earlier fight than finishing their mission. Honestly, if it weren't for Ruby's combat ability, Weiss would have probably been made the team leader. I think it's nice that all the girls' different personalities helps to support each other's shortcomings in these early volumes. Hey, do you girls want to actually look at each other, or why wouldn't they show the kids what their destination looks like? How many of the initiates found a cave, picked up a pretty rock, and returned a failure due to lack of instruction? Why make a torch when your scrolls have flashlights? I like that Yang's upbeat personality is helping Blake come out of her shell. Blake's clearly still pretty standoffish, but it's also easy to see that these two not only work well together, but can also become good friends. What a shame then that they barely interact for the next 5 years of the show.
Well, it's not like this place is very difficult to find.
I think it's really fun how Blake and Ying act as the example of how they should have done it, while Team wastes time with a torch and Team I hate my partner can't figure out which way is north. It's a nice juxtaposition. Why did they continue to go deeper into the cave after they lost their torch?
Some girl's in trouble!
This makes me laugh every time, and I don't know why. Gonna be honest, showing us Jean flying away and then having Ruby fall in is fucking confusing without the context of the next episode. And so, that was the Emerald Forest. This was a nice episode, despite its shortcomings. The characters tend to move pretty weirdly throughout, and we have the unfortunate return of not actually looking at the person they're talking to issues. Pyrrha's clunky introduction to Aura spends more time touting ideologies than actually explaining the mechanic, and the mishandled conclusion leaves the viewer befuddled until they see the following episode. However, it's fun finally getting to see more fighting in the show after waiting through so many weeks of setup, and while the fights aren't too amazing, they are still an exciting showcase for the abilities of those participating. Most importantly, however, things are actually happening. After the slow burn of establishing the school, the pacing cranks up now that the kids are adventuring. There are 2 different fights, a lore dump on Aura, 2 more pairs are formed, Blake and Ying reach the next step of their mission, Jean and Pyrrha encounter one of the final bosses of the forest, and Ruby and Weiss continue to build the development of their relationship. All that without feeling rushed or haphazard. The fans constantly ask for longer episodes nowadays, but these 2 parts prove that's not the problem. The second part of this episode is only 4 minutes long, but we still get a lot done towards furthering the characters and plot in that time. The writers and directors aren't afraid to have the kids progress during Volume 1 episodes, and that's important. Here characters are developing and the story is constantly moving forward, while in later volumes, we spend entire episodes sitting still doing nothing but wait for the finale to roll around. I know I shouldn't be comparing volumes like that, but it's impossible to ignore how inactive the characters are in later volumes after watching them be always on the go here. But this isn't a comparison video, it's a review, and I think these 2 parts are a lot of fun. Both halves get a bunch done in their runtimes, and they work well both alone or seen together. The pacing is nice, the characters are fun, the fights are exciting. Despite all the hang-ups of the episodes, these 2 are some of the most fun to go back and rewatch after all of this time.
What's wrong, Neil?
What's wrong? I wanted to spend my summer in an air-conditioned laboratory, not walking around a future Walmart parking lot.
Oh, come on, Neil. Nature can be your friend if you just give it a chance.
There's a raccoon trying to scavenge Neris.
It's resistant to charms!
Neris, play dead!
I'm out of mana! Awesome! You're coming with Mama!
I wonder if you can hear the crows laughing at me outside. I wish they'd go away. I had her sort of say enlightened sounding shit for a bit. Fuck, I said it wrong again. If you can't figure out a way to make this funny, just cut it out, okay?